Human rights groups are calling on the Australian government to take a more forceful position in negotiating with Iran for the release of detained Australian British academic Kylie Moore-Gilbert. She's been held in the notorious Evin prison in Tehran since late 2018, serving 10 years for espionage. Joining me now is Australian journalist Peter Grester. Peter, thank you so much for your time. You're bringing an important spotlight to this case. We must keep it in the forefront of our minds. What more do you think the Australian government could be doing here?
Well, look, the Australian government insists that it's been doing all it can through diplomatic channels. But frankly, if after all of this time we still don't have a positive outcome, if Kylie Moore-Gilbert is still in Evin prison and still under pretty shocking conditions, then clearly the strategy that they've been using hasn't been enough. They need to change gears somehow. And I think that it needs to be much more public pressure. It seems to me that they need to be using not just Australia's own diplomatic leverage, but also getting a more coordinated response from Australia's allies. Remember, Kylie Moore-Gilbert is also a British national. She's Australian-British dual national, and we need to see the British government also being more actively involved in a coordinated way, because this doesn't happen just through quiet diplomatic channels. I think one of the lessons from our case in Egypt was the way in which public pressure also added to the campaign. Now, it doesn't always necessarily work in the case of the officials in places like Iran or Egypt, but what it does do is apply pressure to the diplomats and the politicians here in Australia, so that they can actually get more actively engaged and push for a more positive outcome.
Peter, we have seen some success with Australia freeing some of these prisoners through those quiet diplomatic channels in recent times, but why is it, do you think, that this individual is such a prize political prisoner for Iran?
Laura, I don't really understand why Kylie Moore-Gilbert in particular has been singled out. Part of the problem may well also be the timing. Remember, we've seen the tensions between Iran and the West ramped up in recent weeks and months. And I think Kylie is certainly, and any other Western prisoners that are in Iranian prisons under similar circumstances, have all been caught up in this kind of shift in politics and diplomacy. But it's still hard to understand what in particular could be keeping Kylie Moore-Gilbert in prison and under these really shocking conditions. I mean, she's had, as I understand it, only a couple of phone calls with her family. She's held in solitary confinement, isolated from other prisoners. She's had almost no representation or no visits to consular staff from the Australian embassy. The conditions are really extraordinarily difficult, and it seems to me that absolutely unconscionable and inexcusable that she should be in these kinds of conditions.
Kylie Moore-Gilbert certainly paints the picture of an incredibly brave woman. The circumstances in which she's being held, the reports, and I'm not sure whether they were verified, Peter, that she was offered some kind of deal from the Iranian authorities saying, admit you're a spy and we'll let you out well before the 10-year sentence. Have you heard anything along the lines of that and why she wouldn't take a deal like that?
Look, in fact, in letters smuggled out of Evin prison, and I believe the letters have been verified, Kylie said that she had seen two offers around the time of her sentence. One was effectively for a conviction sentence of 13 months, which would have been effectively time served, and another was for a 10-year prison sentence. And I understand that there was an implied offer of work for the Iranian intelligence services, basically asking her to be a spy. And Kylie has rejected that out of hand, saying under no circumstances would she ever spy for any country. And I think she understands as well as anybody that even if you accepted that kind of offer, it wouldn't mean freedom. It would mean constant pressure from the Iranian authorities. It would mean constant blackmail. It would be incredibly difficult circumstances. And one of the things I realised when we were in prison was, in fact, we were getting similar hints of some kind of deal, some kind of offer, some kind of agreement, if I agreed to certain conditions. And I also felt that there was no way I was going to accept any conditions, because I felt that I was an innocent person. There was never any circumstances in which I'd agreed to or admit to being guilty of anything. I felt that we were being held in prison on principle. We were being held in prison as an example, as a form of leverage. And I felt that this was an attack on press freedom, and I felt that there was no way that I'd give in to that kind of pressure because I didn't want to compromise those principles. And I think Kylie probably feels the same way, that if you give up, if you call it quits, if you make a deal, then what you're doing is making a deal with the devil and giving up one of the few things, I think, that helps you stay sane, that helps you stay strong, and more importantly, helps you maintain your own dignity. And that's the kind of strategy that will keep you psychologically strong. Now, we know that Kylie Moore-Gilbert is under incredible psychological pressure. She says as much in those letters. But I think holding the line on this is absolutely essential for her.
Well, Peter Grester, yours is an incredible story. We hope one day soon we can be telling the Kylie Moore-Gilbert freedom story as well. Appreciate your time, as always.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.